At this conference, there are many talks on tone. There are many talks on sound change. There are not many talks on tone change. Welcome to this talk. I'm going to describe a change that happened to Mandarin tone 2, a mid-rising tone pictured here, over the course of about 100 years. How do the phonetic realizations of tones change over time? It's a question that has not received much scholarly attention, but I found that once you start looking into this question, it's hard to look away. And I hope by the end of this talk, you will also feel intrigued by tone change. Tone change lies at the crossroads of sound change and tone variation research and has potential to contribute a lot to both areas. Now, sound change research on consonants and vowels leads us to expect that diachronic change will reflect synchronic variation, as synchronic variants are the seeds of potential change. But when it comes to tone, there are just so many variants, so many ways pitch, height, and contour of a tone can vary depending on so many different factors. So which seeds get watered? Which tone variants eventually become phonologized? In this talk, I will address two research questions. First, what change happened to Mandarin tone 2? And two, can we identify a phonetic precursor to that change? I will argue that the timing of tone 2's rise has shifted to a later alignment within the syllable. As evidence, I present tonal acoustic analyses from early 20th century and compare them to early 21st century acoustic studies. New analysis of a recording from 1922 reveals a phonetic precursor, so we can identify which tone variant seed grew, spreading across new environments beyond its original conditioning environment. Yes, it is an exciting time to be alive and do research on tone change. And that's because 100 years ago, our predecessors began making recordings and doing acoustic analysis of tonal languages. 100 years turns out to be sufficient time depth to observe some subtle yet visible tone changes. One such early recording is the object of the present study. In 1922, the Chinese linguist Yuanren Zhao was recorded on a phonograph demonstrating standard Mandarin, which is based on Beijing Mandarin pronunciation. He was recorded modeling monosyllabic words in isolation, known as the citation tone, as well as disyllabic words in isolation and monologues. I did an acoustic study of his monosyllabic and disyllabic words for a total of 549 tokens. Now, to compare F0 trajectories across different studies, I used the same normalization formula as was used in the 21st century acoustic studies. They use a logarithmic transformation of F0 values to Zhao tone numbers, with 1 as low and 5 as high. So figure 2 shows the results of the acoustic analysis for Mandarin citation tone in 1922. We have tone 1 high level, tone 2 mid rising, tone 3 low falling rising, and tone 4 high falling. Here's a recording of those tones uttered in that order. What I want you to notice is the blue line of tone 2. Notice that the rising slope begins or initiates right at the beginning of the vowel. And this early timing of the rise is consistent with other early 20th century acoustic studies, like Bradley 1915 and Obata and Toshima 1934. Also, Zhao's tone 2 citation tokens consistently show initiation of the rise at the beginning of the vowel. Over the course of the 20th century, however, the timing of the rise changed. Figure 4 compares citation tone in 1922 with citation tone from a study in 2006, Shi and Wang 2006. Notice that unlike early 20th century, in 2006, the rise initiates later, starts later into the vowel. And this later rise is consistent with results from other contemporaneous acoustic studies, like this one from Shu 1997, who states that the rise starts at 20% into the vowel. In fact, you could look at any acoustic study of Mandarin citation tone done today. Here's one from 2020. Tone 2 is going to have either a short level run or a slight fall before the rise begins. That's not the way it was pronounced in the early 20th century. So what happened to Mandarin tone 2? Well, the rise has shifted rightward, and that change in the tonal alignment has, of course, had an effect on the contour shape. So much for research question number 1. Moving on to research question number 2, where did that delayed rise variant come from? In other words, in what phonetic environment do we find the precursor to this change? Now, other early 20th century acoustic studies, they only look at citation tone, one environment, monosyllables in isolation. So they're not going to be able to help us answer that question. But the 1922 data included disyllabic words. So we can look at the first syllable and the second syllable to see what tone to contour looks like before and after other tones in 1922. Figure 5 shows tone 2 in final position. So this is the second syllable of a disyllabic word. And the solid line shows what tone 2 looks like after a preceding tone 1 or tone 2. These tone 1 high level, tone 2 mid rising, these are the tones that have high tonal offsets. They end high. But you'll recall that tone 2 starts mid. Tone 2 has a mid onset. So after the high onset of tone 1 and tone 2, there's a required F0 movement to get to that starting point before the rise begins. And that recovery movement takes time. That means that the rise does not start at the beginning of the vowel in this phonetic context. It is shifted rightward. Dun, 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 dun. A phonetic precursor to the change that we observed in the citation tone form. And this is brought to you by good old garden variety tonal co-articulation. So carryover effects of preceding tone onto following tone. This is a type of tonal co-articulation that has been extensively documented as occurring in Mandarin. And in 1922, that carryover effect generated a seed of potential change. So now let's watch the seed grow by comparing tone 2 in different environments across the 2 time periods. And what I'd like you to notice first is that in 1922, the final position variant, this is the one that showed the carryover effect, it shows a delayed rise. But initial position and citation forms do not. In 1922, the delayed rise was predictable from the phonetic context, from the tonal context. But compare the 1922 forms in the top row with Zhang Yan's 2018 study of disyllabic words. So we see final position and initial position from her study, and Shiren Wang's 2006 citation tone study. So in that second row, in that bottom row, we see by the early 21st century, the late rise variant shows up in final position, but also in initial position and in citation form, where it has no reason to be there. Initial position and citation form, they don't have a preceding tone to carry over onto them. Instead, we're seeing the spread of a phonetic variant into new environments beyond its original conditioning environment. And that delayed rise variant has managed to propagate itself to all the different phonetic contexts. So it's become phonologized. Now we can compare Mandarin tone 2 changes with rising tone changes in other languages, such as Thai high tone, Northern Vietnamese Sak tone, and Yongnian tone 3. And just a glance at the changes, you'll start wondering, why are rising tones in these different languages changing in similar ways? They're from 4 different language families, but they all have a similar tonal typology and tonal co-articulation patterns of carryover assimilation. Mandarin and Thai both have anticipatory dissimilation as well. So we see similar seeds in similar soil, you get a similar looking plant emerging. So this study uncovered evidence of assimilatory carryover effects generating a precursor that then spread to new environments, resulting in a tone change. Now, this research reinforces the link between synchronic variation and diachronic change. This is a time-tested lesson from sound change research. Mandarin tone 2 change looks like it's phonetically grounded, much like the most common sound changes that we find in consonants and vowels. In conclusion, if the past century already brought us such intriguing tone changes, that leads to the question, what more will we see in this century? Yep, it's a good time to be alive and do research on tone change. Thank you.